all Pascal students, and a warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Dr. Basil, founding partner of August Global Partners and former managing partner at EDBI. We're privileged to have Dr. Lui, whose extensive experience and expertise in emerging technologies have played a pivotal role in shaping Singapore's global innovation landscape. So, welcome Dr. Basil Lui. So let's commence to our conversation with the first topic, which is on the drive towards digitalization and deep tech. Dr. Lui, your influential contributions at EDBI span a myriad of sectors including mobility, advanced manufacturing, future computing, blockchain, AR, agri-food tech, and healthcare biotech. Could you kindly elaborate on how EDBI navigates the challenges of investing in deep tech and emerging sectors? How do you prioritize investments in such diverse fields? And what criteria guides your decision-making process?
Okay, first of all, thanks for inviting me to this podcast. And it's a very good initiative, this Pascal project. Kudos to you for putting this together. A bit of background. EDBI actually stands for the investment arm of the Economic Development Board of Singapore. Hence, EDB, and then I is the investment, so EDBI for short. It was established about 15 years ago. And prior to that, EDB, the parent organization, always used tax incentives to attract the big boys to Singapore. But about 15 years ago, by the way, EDB was established more than 50 years ago, 50, right? EDBI's establishment was about 15, and that was really to move up the value chain because a lot of other countries were kind of mimicking what EDB does and offering tax incentives to also attract the big boys. So in order to up our game, EDBI was created to invest into upcoming startups. So instead of using tax incentives, startups tend not to be profitable yet. So we take a bet on them, an equity stake, give them some money in exchange for an equity stake, and then the relevant ones that can actually add to the capabilities that the whole of Singapore is looking for would be, targeted. In answer to your question, how do we prioritize the types of startups, the deep tech startups that we invest in? Is really for EDBI, our job is to talk to all the different government agencies and ask them about their technology roadmap, their technology wish list, what kind of capabilities to bring into Singapore. So for instance, when we spoke to the Ministry of Transport, the Land Transport Authority, there was a lot of talk about looking into driverless cars, right? So out we went globally looking for relevant driverless cars startups to invest in. Of course, the prerequisite is that they have to be keen to set up a Singapore presence, like a R&D presence, for example, because that's the capability building that we're looking for. So just to give you an example, EDBI, in 2016, we invested in this company called Newtonomy. It was a Boston HQ. They were working on autonomous driving. What attracted us to them was two of their scientists. One of them actually was an advisor to the Mars rover. So obviously when a Mars rover lands on Mars, it has to be fully autonomous, right? Because the speed of light, the signal takes about 20 minutes. So it has to be fully autonomous. Then they decided to translate that technology for earthbound cars, So we thought that's not bad. Maybe we should take a deeper look. And then they committed to having significant R&D done in Singapore. Actually, the Singapore MIT Alliance for Research and Technology, SMART, SMART, one of their professors was actually seconded to SMART in Singapore. So he was already teaching a lot of students on autonomous driving technologies. And the commitment was to actually have a fully owned subsidiary in Singapore and to actually work on autonomous driving in Singapore. So we invested in them because they had a very strong Singapore angle. And fast forward to the present, Newtonomy was acquired by a company called Aptiv, and then Aptiv entered into a joint venture with Hyundai, right? And then the joint venture is now called Motional. Motional is obviously headquartered in Boston, but guess what? The R&D remains in Singapore because it had the elements of the Newtonomy R&D staff, mostly Singaporeans. So Motional's R&D is in Singapore. And if you read the news recently, only as 2-3 days ago, there was a big announcement about Hyundai setting up an advanced manufacturing center to manufacture electric vehicles and smart cars. If you dig deeper, it is also leveraging on Motional's R&D, which then I believe is also leveraging on ultimately EDBI's investment into Newtonomy in 2016. And we put a very small check, but this is what we want to see, a very long tail knock-on effect that is beneficial for Singapore. So for very small check size, we have attracted all the necessary capabilities so that for the first time in history, I believe Singapore is literally manufacturing smart cars, right? A tiny little country where it was never known to be a manufacturer of cars. It always, when you talk about manufacturer of cars, it tends to be Japan and the US, right? You know, the Toyotas of the world, the Fords of the world. But you never hear of Singapore manufacturing cars. So just only last week, very proud to say that Singapore is finally manufacturing smart cars. And the future of autonomous cars to be exported globally. So very soon you'll see a Hyundai Ioniq 5 car with the autonomous technology born out of Singapore or spun out of Singapore, plying the roads in United States and eventually Singapore, right? So that's great. So that's how it's a very long story, but I just want to drive home the point that it's all very targeted when we speak to the various government agencies. Another government agency that we speak to is Singapore Food Agency. So that one I can elaborate later, but the whole strategy is to keep the conversation going with various government agencies. The Energy Markets Authority also, what kind of new types of energy that Singapore requires. I'll touch on that later. So everything must be relevant to Singapore when it comes to bringing deep tech capabilities to Singapore. So that's how we prioritize things. Things that can make a lot of financial gain but don't have a Singapore angle, we will deprioritize it. In fact, we won't do. Which also explains why we set up a commercial arm called August Global Partners to cover longer term bets that don't have an immediate Singapore angle yet, but we feel that we'll eventually have one. So the commercial arm can go ahead and take a look first, cultivate it to an extent where eventually there's a Singapore angle, and then that's when the whole region will benefit, not just Singapore. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing on how you prioritize investments such that you can perhaps have a greater Singapore benefit and angle, as you mentioned through the entire discussion. And it was very insightful seeing how EDBI actually works to promote this kind of Singaporean benefit for the region as well. Let's share insights into the challenges and opportunities encountered in driving early stage deep tech investments.
Yes. So yes, if you run a commercial fund, it has a fund life. So then that's when the numbers really matters. It means by right, the startup should be profitable, but not many startups are profitable, right? That's why they're called startups. So fortunately, EDBI is a strategic mandate kind of fund. Strategic mandate means yes, there are financial objectives, but it's more of a patient capital. We don't really have a fund life for EDBI, so we can take longer term bets, and so that allows EDBI to invest into deep tech startups because we all recognize that it does take a longer gestation period. Yeah, so that's the overarching idea of having a strategic fund because that's when the dual mandate. So of course one is financial, but the other one would be the developmental mandate, which means relevant, innovative technological capabilities that Singapore wants to see.
Thank you, Dr. Let's move on to our next topic, which is on harnessing emerging technologies to build a sustainable future. So, as a visionary in emerging technologies, you've overseen investments in quantum computing, microelectronics, and advanced manufacturing. So, as a visionary in these emerging technologies, how do you see emerging technologies contributing to a sustainable future? And are there specific areas you find particularly promising?
Yes, yes. I mean, by definition, deep tech slash emerging technologies, there are many definitions to it, but basically it's frontier technologies. But I think inherently they mean making things more productive. When you embrace innovation, and that by definition would definitely reduce the carbon footprint when you do things more productively and more intelligently, right? So that's why Singapore, loves to embrace innovation. We always strive to be more and more productive because we don't really have natural resources. So we just depend on our human capital, and so our investment into technology is always at the top of mind. Yeah. And that ties in with sustainability, right? So once again, if my first example of investing into driverless cars, it frees up a lot of resources, it frees up a lot of land space, right? Singapore, don't quote me, but I think we have devoted more than 10% of our land to roads, right? We can't keep building more roads, right? So if you embrace autonomous driving, then you don't really need to dedicate too much scarce space, land, to building more roads, more car parks, because by nature, if the car is autonomously driving around, then it doesn't need to park, right? And then you free up a lot of valuable land. So that's one example of trying to be sustainable. In fact, when I spoke to the Ministry of Transport, they were also looking into urban air mobility. So translation, flying cars. It's still pretty much a work in progress, but that will also release even more land space, right? Just imagine flying cars don't really need roads, right? Yeah. But I believe that's more country to country, because if you can fly within right now the battery life is being constrained by the battery life. So as battery technologies keep improving, then you can increase the range of the electric vehicle. Neighboring countries and Singapore would have more interaction through the logistics of having air flights, air passengers, air cargo, right, within a 30-minute radius. So we're talking anything about 400 km radius. So even rural areas with have no roads can be reachable, right? So just imagine you don't need to spend a lot of money building roads into rural places. You can have an amazing, house that is off-grid, and then you can just fly there and then you fly in, right? All within 30 minutes. So that's another idea of sustainability. And even for Singapore, after or during the pandemic, we all realized that even supply chains are important. Food, the sources of our food is important, and then increasingly, we also like to know, what we are eating and how it's being delivered to us. And then there's a lot of push by the Singapore Food Agency to make sure that they have this tagline, 30 by 30, which means 30% of Singapore's nutritional needs by the year 2030. What do we do? So when I spoke to them, they said, we really need to figure out how to grow our own food. And said, in Singapore, we don't really have enough land to grow our own food. He said, how about things like vertical farming, recyclable aquaculture systems to grow into fish farms, basically. But how do we grow our own fish? And even how do we grow our own meat in labs? So Singapore is the first ever country to allow the commercialization of lab-grown meat. Yeah. So we did invest in some of these companies. The breakthrough recently came when they figured out how to synthesize some growth hormone or growth compound. I mean, it comes from it's the bovine serum. It comes from young calves, but it has been since then synthesized, so there's no need to use the serum coming out from young calves. So with that, you can then start scaling up and growing meat in labs, and hopefully that would be something that's palatable. So that's one thing about science. Yes, it makes sense. You can grow meat in labs, but then next thing is to maybe figure out whether the public really accepts eating lab grown meat. But very, very sustainable, because to rear a cow, you need acres and acres of grassland. You need swimming pools of water just to grow one cow, and only to slaughter it, which is not nice to some people who don't believe in killing. So there's also the ethical part of it, right? But if you can just grow meat in labs, then you can be very, very sustainable, and the carbon footprint, the amount of resources you use is much, much less. So yeah, I mean, Singapore by definition, because we lack natural resources, and by definition then we focus on all kinds of technological innovations, will be a very highly sustainable country by default. Yeah, we always have to seek all these productive technologies.
All right, thank you. So that was a very insightful discussion on how Singapore prioritizes productivity as well as food security because of our challenges, and how there are multiple solutions which you can use to create a sustainable future for Singapore. So on to the next question. So with a diverse background into the various fields they invest in, such as quantum computing and microelectronics and manufacturing as well. So how do you envision the convergence of all of these fields shaping the technological landscape in the coming decade?
Wow, yeah. Yes, technologies are definitely converging. Take for instance, semiconductors. Singapore has always been a semiconductor hub, and it's always moving up and up the value chain. So I think it started its days as we embraced disk drives, right? Yes, disk drives actually used to be mechanical spinning disks with but then eventually now we have moved on to solid state ROMs and RAMs, right? There's no moving parts, and then all the disk drive industry has have moved on to either Thailand or Malaysia, which is great. I mean, it benefits everyone. That's just so. In the past, you can just silo everything. Yeah, this is semiconductor, and at the most you can say that then it spins off precision engineering industry. So it's very, very well defined. But you fast forward to the present, I think it's all kinds of technologies and different industries are all kind of merging. You need to be multidisciplinary. So even though my PhD was in semiconductors, I find it now being utilized in this recent trend of AI, thanks to yes, I'm sure you have been following the open AI saga and ChatGPT. But then if you dig deep enough, it's also comes back to semiconductor technology, right? Without the knowledge of developing and designing a chip, right? Then you wouldn't enable cloud computing, which requires all these GPU chips, right? And then you wouldn't be able to, have such a great tool like ChatGPT, for example. So knowledge in semiconductors is very important. Of course, then you have to marry it with knowledge in programming, knowledge in large language models, which is very interesting, but could only happen as the computational speed of these hardware chips keep improving, for example. And then you can start, now you can use these AI LLM models. Frankly, I find the most useful use of LLM right now is in healthcare industry, right? Because you can have a highly trained specialist in, say, heart, right? So then he needs about a few hours to look at an echocardiogram, which is taking an ultrasound of your heart to figure out what's wrong with your heart. But if it's complemented by an AI who can straight away pinpoint that, oh, there's probably something wrong in this echocardiogram, but you need the specialist to zoom in and say, oh, yes, you're right. So it's a win-win for everyone. The patient gets diagnosed much faster. The specialist can see many more patients without any sacrifice in quality because he's just being backed up by the AI to pinpoint the problem. And so he sees more patients and more patients get detected much earlier. So everyone wins, right? So that's when you have the whole confluence of different technologies coming in, right? You need to be a good medical doctor. You also need to know the existence of these AI tools, and then behind the scenes, you also need to know that these are semiconductor chips that are powering it, right? So you have a marriage of many different disciplines. Same with like the autonomous car that I just mentioned. Not only do you need to know how to manufacture a car, you also need in a smart car, autonomous car, you have actually I'm not trying to promote NVIDIA, but you have NVIDIA GPUs in the car, right? Open up the boot, or you look at the bottom, they found a way to insert a couple of GPUs there to do all the computational requirements real time, because you can put it into the cloud, but then there's a latency, and then it can't react that fast. But so it's multidisciplinary as well. And then there are things like the sensors. It's not all software. You need the LiDAR sensors, and then what's LiDAR? It's these things that shoot out beams of lasers, and then it gets reflected. Then you actually know the distance of the object from the car. So these LiDAR sensors actually used to be in this R&D scientific realm, state-of-the-art things that originated from the military, but now it's on every single autonomous vehicle. So you need to know multidisciplinary things. And then even for the cars, they tend to be electric now. Then there's a lot of battery technology. That means your material science knowledge, your chemical engineering, you need to be very good in that as well, right? So yes, we are in a world where it helps to be multidisciplinary. So keep learning. Never just think that, I only want to study maths, I only want to study physics, but there's more to it. Yeah. And then beyond that, you also need to understand how human beings think, so welcome to the corporate world. It's like, why is it the VHS was adopted over Betamax? Or maybe that's a bad example. More present is probably, I need to think of a good example. Why RISC-V open source chip design is not as widely used as maybe some other proprietary chip design software. Then you need to understand that actually sometimes there's the corporate reasons on why certain technologies are adopted over others, right? Like why is Microsoft Office still the number one software tool that's being used in the corporate world, for example? There are other types of software out there that is just as easy to use, but they don't seem to be as popular, for example, right? So sometimes it's not just technology as well. So you also need to have a bit of business knowledge on why things are the way they are. So, I think it's an exciting world. I'm still learning. I'm 52 years old and I'm still learning. Like blockchain was the most recent technology that comes about. It's not all about crypto, but blockchain is actually a very useful tool that is multidisciplinary. It can be used for many industries to track land title deeds, electronic medical records, you name it, because it is, we were talking about immutable distributed ledger of records. Just about any industry requires that, right? So it's not just crypto. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lu. I found it very interesting how the technological field has progressed into one where the marriage and amalgamation of different knowledge from different sectors is key to success in the field, making it imperative for us to partake in multidisciplinary learning to remain competitive and relevant in today's economic field. Okay, so let's proceed to our next topic, which is on building a vibrant and resilient healthcare system. So, building on your pioneering role in establishing Singapore as a premier biomedical sciences hub in Asia, Dr. Lu, you've overseen investments in precision medicine, cell and gene therapy, genomics, digital health, and more. So, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, how have EDBI's healthcare investments, such as in Moderna and Doctor Anywhere, contributed to Singapore's resilience and global healthcare advancements?
Yes. So it's good that EDBI is a strategic investor and a long-term investor, and so one of the reasons why we could invest into Moderna was because of our strategic nature of things. So we were fortunate enough to identify Moderna and invest in it as a disruptive mRNA platform to come out with customized vaccines, and we did that investment before COVID happened. It was a small check size, but we were very keen to attract Moderna and its capabilities to Singapore. So that was the underlying rationale, and we were happy that we did that, because who could have predicted the pandemic to have happened, and that happens to allow us to open doors and connect Moderna's CEO to the Singapore government authorities, and it smoothed and paved the way for all Singaporeans and anyone who's living in Singapore to have the latest Moderna vaccines. So yes, we definitely did not lose money from our investments, but strategically it also allowed Singapore to be prioritized in terms of obtaining the latest Moderna vaccines. And fast forward to the present, Moderna actually has established its presence in Singapore, and I would say that because of EDBI's foray into investing into mRNA, one would say that it is now attracting other mRNA startups to Singapore because of what we did in the past. So it's actually an accumulation of a lot of effort. Biotech investments, it started more than 30 years ago when the then founding chairman, Philip Yeo of the Economic Development Board, identified biomedical as a future economic pillar for Singapore. And thanks to the political stability of Singapore, you can have a lot of long-term planning, right? So fast forward to the present, after 30 years of R&D into biotech, we have a lot of talent actually, and then we do send scholars, in the hundreds every year, and over time they all, not all of them want to be scientists. Some of them actually go into industry, gain industrial knowledge, and then they come back and they contribute to Singapore, which is wonderful, and especially in the biomedical space. Normally, the main complaint is after we invest in startups, the main complaint of these startups is there's not enough talent in Singapore. But when it comes to biomedical, there seems to be very good talent, because they seem to be returning to Singapore. So that's actually quite a good point. But Singapore also continues to attract talent by virtue of having a very virtuous deep tech ecosystem, not limited to biotech. I mean, even in quantum computing and supercomputing. You speak to the Institute of High Performance Computing. So, and then we're very good at data centers. But I digress. Back to biotech. Yes, we seem to be attracting quite a lot of interesting biotech startups, contract research organizations, contract development and manufacturing organizations for pharma. We do have most of the big pharma in Singapore. So the ecosystem is quite good. Singapore is known to be a biotech hub. We strive to be the next Boston of the world. Boston is one of the very good biotech hubs. So is San Diego. Singapore hopefully is up there with these biotech hubs. So I think it's a result of long-term planning and ecosystem building that we have reached to this stage. Yep. So hope it continues to thrive. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing on how investments and continued planning have led to the building of the biotech ecosystem in Singapore and let us become as competitive as it is today. So in the context of Singapore, since we have such an aging population, so considering this aging population and the challenges posed by this, so what is a vision for the future of healthcare and how do you propose to prepare for it?
Yes. So once again, I think Singapore is a very pragmatic society. So it turns out that our healthcare budget will exceed our defense budget, which is quite astounding because I mean, most of the ever since I grew up, it's always the defense budget that is the biggest, but it seems that the healthcare budget would soon exceed that. So in order to do something about it, and plus the fact that actually Singapore has one of the longest living populations in the world. Some reports have indicated that we have now exceeded Japan, right? So yes, so what do we do about it? You can live longer, but if your last few years are not healthy and you're bedridden and hooked up to a life support system, it doesn't mean anything. It just increases the healthcare budget, right? So yes, so you can see there's a lot of emphasis on living healthily. To reduce the burden on hospitals, to reduce the number of people falling ill, and then creating this strain on our hospitals. So it's better to live well and age well, means don't fall ill, right? So and back to your previous point on the convergence of technologies, now we can do that. You know why? In the past, we always depended on visiting our general practitioner, and at the most maybe we visit 4 times a year, and then it's like, it's like seeing a stranger only 4 times a year, and all the GP can tell you is, oh, yeah, eat properly, exercise more. I mean, that tends to be it, right? And if you're under the weather, yeah, here's some medicine, and once again, rest and recover. Fast forward to present, now we have amazing technology and always-on devices that can monitor all your healthcare statistics 24/7, right? And then you throw in your AI, your large language models, it can automatically detect what's wrong with you and give you a warning. Like, simple things like you're sitting down too long, time to get up and exercise. You don't need a doctor to tell you that. You don't need to go and, like you see some of these Hollywood shows, you have a billionaire who hires a full-time person to always monitor you. You don't need that. You just need to invest in a smart wearable, and it will give you all your, it will track you, right? It will track your heart rate, it will track your movement, it will track your, breathing, how long you have been sleeping. The things will just get more and more advanced. There are all these glucose monitors as well will tell you that you're having a insulin spike, yeah, things like that. Right now, with the technology that's available, you can easily have yourself monitored 24/7, and that's very good. It will, as more and more people embrace these wearable technologies, then there'll be a lot of advice on how to keep healthy, and then bend the cost curve. Eventually, we want our population to be healthy, and if you can embrace all these good habits and get it monitored, then at least you know that you have a benchmark. You say, oh, you were here, you used to be able to walk 5,000 steps, now you're walking 6,000 steps, eventually you're going to hit 10,000 steps a day. That's improvement, right? So then of course for people who take up sports, and then it's a bit more intensive, your VO2 max and all that, you can always measure it and see whether you're improving, right? And how low is your resting heart rate. So lots of technologies out there. And I think it can be put to good use to help our population live well and age well. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lui. We really found it interesting how the implementation of technology such as AI or wearable technology and so on can help reduce the burden on healthcare, and in general help us prepare for the aging population. So moving on to the next topic on addressing climate change. Your unwavering commitment to addressing climate change and reimagining our relationship with the planet is commendable. So, in your esteemed view, how can governments and corporations effectively collaborate to address environmental challenges while fostering economic growth and innovation?
Yes, this one is in the acronym. Yeah, Singapore loves acronyms. It's called G2G, government to government. There are a lot of talks. So recently, I believe that Singapore, driven by DBS, SGX, and Temasek, they came out with a carbon exchange. So Singapore, by definition, I think it's carbon positive because we are a small island consuming a lot of resources. But the whole idea is to work with other developing countries and other developing country governments to establish some kind of carbon exchange because they have a lot of forests, for example, right? And those are carbon negative, right? So is there a way, and then some of them are even toying around with using blockchain to make sure that there is no falsification, and there should be some kind of standards that's met, and then maybe the blockchain as an underlying protocol would make sure that everything that's being transacted is immutable, right? And then there's no double counting, and there's a minimum smart contract standard, right? So just imagine, I mean, that's your confluence of technologies again, right? Who would have thought that? Singapore, for example, has a lot of data centers. Data centers consume a lot of power. So how do we offset that, with the renewable energies that's being available in other countries, right? So there's like hydroelectric power in Sabah, for example. Then I think Philippines and Indonesia, they're embracing geothermal technologies because we are in the ring of fire in this region. Actually, ring of fire can be used for geothermal, which is great. Very, 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 very carbon negative, in fact. Yeah. So yeah, and then the mechanism to do all these offsets would be through this carbon exchange. Yeah. So I think Singapore's trying to show the way that this can be done. And I think they're onboarding more and more. It's voluntary now, but it's like a snowball effect. Once you get more governments signed on to this carbon exchange, I think it would be successful eventually. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So could you also shed light on successful investment practices where these sort of like innovative technologies have been deployed in Singapore for a sustainable future?
Okay. Carbon exchanges aside, what we have invested in is, I alluded to, is like growing meat in labs, because we feel that really reduces the carbon footprint. That's one, so we actually invested in one. Then we have been looking at synthetic palm oil, because palm oil plantations take up a lot of land, and if you can synthesize palm oil, then you do away with the need of actually having lots of palm oil plantations, right? So that's something that my colleagues are closely looking at it. They haven't pulled the trigger yet because I want to make sure that the science works and is scalable. Yeah. So there's a lot in that area. Even for in terms of precision medicines, sometimes governments tend to over-order certain medicines only to realize that the drug doesn't work for half the population. So if you do some genome sequencing and you realize that that's because half the population's genome are not really, they don't really react well to such a drug, or they're resistant to such a drug, then you shouldn't have ordered too much. So that's very wasteful. So if you know how to do a bit more precision medicine techniques, and characterize the population, then you can save a lot of costs because you only need to order half the drugs, right? Then your healthcare bill goes down. So those are the things. Yeah.
Those are like quite a few interesting investments. So now let's address our final topic, which is on emerging technologies and the future of education and work. So your insightful perspectives on the prevailing megatrend of emerging technologies impacting education and employment are very thought-provoking. So what guidance would you offer to young enthusiasts to prepare for their future studies and navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of this exciting and challenging field?
Wow, yeah, I get that a lot. So I'm biased. I've been always science trained. So I always encourage parents. Yes, lots of my colleagues are parents, and some of them are grandparents already. Yes, that's how old I am. So advice to their kids and grandkids would be, do encourage the kids when young to embrace STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, STEM. Singapore has always embarked on emphasizing that, so which is a joy to work with, because whenever I go to a fellow government agency and I talk to the CEO of the agency, they're all very open to innovative ideas. I even went to the Energy Markets Authority, and a few years ago they're telling me, "Oh, Basil, we should look at geothermal." And I said, "What? Singapore's so small? Can is it?" And I said, "Yeah, we're exploring it. You never know. There might be enough of a heat source underneath Singapore to do geothermal." So yeah, so it's wonderful when you start talking to all these heads of agencies, and they all tend to be STEM trained when they were young. I mean, once again, being biased, my cohort, they all tend to be very scientifically trained. And of course, then some of them subsequently went to do an MBA, because in the business world, you need to understand that. But you can always do that at a later stage. I think when you're younger, the hard, difficult concepts, the hard sciences, it's good to tackle them when you're young, right? Then you can have a very solid foundation. And then once you understand all the hard sciences, not to belittle business education, but then you can also grasp the complexities of business management models as well. But for example, you study physics, everything comes from first principles, right? So it's a very good training. Same for maths. Maths, you always start out with certain first principles, and then you come up with the formula. Those are very good foundations to build on. And then from there, as then you take on more social studies, more economics, more business kind of courses, then that's when the complexities of human nature comes in, which is not easy sometimes. Yeah. Why was this done instead of that? Why was Sam Altman fired by that board? Then you understand, because the board's mandate is different. So you need to understand those things as well, not just physics and maths. But I would suggest have a solid STEM education first for the kids before graduating to the more complex social sciences. Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so thank you for sharing the importance of STEM education, and I really do agree that it is quite crucial in this age where there's so many emerging technologies that is driving our future innovation and drive to sustainability. So other than perhaps STEM, especially for kids from a young age, what other skills and perhaps training could these kids or students undergo such that they can not only survive but thrive in this dynamic kind of environment with all these different technologies arising?
Yeah, I think the crucial thing is always be receptive to learning new things, right? It's not like, oh yes, I passed my PSLE, I passed my O levels, I passed my A levels, and then finally I've done my first degree, I've made my parents happy. That shouldn't be the way things. You don't do things for others. You do things because you want to keep learning, right? And I'm still learning, right? Yeah. In fact, I always joke that my PhD is pretty redundant now because the technology has moved on so quickly. So you always have to be in that mode where you keep learning and know what questions to ask. I mean, thanks to the advent of the ChatGPTs of the world, there are so many great AI tools that are productivity tools. So you don't need to memorize things, but you need to be able to ask the right questions. So your mind must always be asking why. Yeah. So it is imperative lah. I always tell people, never retire, always keep learning. Then you also age well. You also delay the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease because you keep exercising your brain, which effectively is like a muscle. Use it or you lose it. So I encourage everyone, your whole lifespan, always try to learn something new. Even for career progression, right? It enables you to be more, extremely relevant to society if you keep learning the latest things. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do agree that it's important to not lose your hunger and thirst for knowledge and to ask the salient questions in life. So thank you so much, Dr. Lui, for graciously sharing your profound insights on harnessing emerging technologies for a sustainable future. This enlightening discussion at the Pascal Forum has provided invaluable perspectives. As we collectively strive for a sustainable future, we aspire to continue fostering innovation and collaboration for the betterment of our global community. So thank you for gracing us with your presence today.
Likewise, thanks for inviting me to this, and I hope that I have given some nugget of wisdom, if you want to call it that. But never retire, just keep learning. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.